Welcome one and all to Storybox, the place to be if you are a lover of stories, learning, growth, and you want to improve your life. My name is Jay Phantom, and I've made it my purpose to unbox and share the amazing stories from people of every profession all over the world. I am truly grateful that you have decided to listen in today. Now let's journey into the Storybox together and hear more about whose story will be unboxed today. Well, everyone, I'm delighted to welcome the beautiful Nikki Sharp to the Storybox podcast today. Nikki has worked previously as an international model living in many different countries, including Australia. She's a wellness expert. She decided to create a detox plan for herself because there was nothing else on the market that appealed to her. And she created your ebook, which immediately became a best-selling item through word of mouth, which is probably the best form of marketing, in my opinion. The results speak for themselves as people across the world have tried it, loved it, and she's since turned the detox into a mobile app. It hit number 1 in 6 countries in 24 hours. Wow. And the best-selling book through Random House titled The 5-Day Real Food Detox, which hit number 4 on Amazon bestseller.
Number one.
Number one. Sorry, number 1. I correct myself. Even better. Nikki Sharp, welcome so much to Storybox Podcast.
Thank you. I'm like, when people are like, oh, and it was like iTunes top 50. I'm like, my podcast was iTunes top 30.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that either.
Yeah.
We're getting into so much good stuff. You're a woman of many, many different talents and skills. You're a very busy lady, so I appreciate you taking the time for me today. Really looking forward to actually diving into and unboxing your story a little bit because there's so much there. I normally have one question though before we dive into all that.
Yeah.
What does success look like to you?
Oh man, that is such a good question. It's actually changed over the years for me because in the past, success was all about what achievements did I have, right? Did I hit number 1 in whatever I was doing, or did I download or have a bunch of downloads or XYZ? Success for me now means, do I feel fulfilled with what I'm doing? Do I feel happy and passionate every day that I wake up? And am I happy with the work that I put into whatever it is that I'm doing?
Where did this idea of success come from for you? Has it been like a gradual thing over time, or is there a catalyst moment somewhere in your life?
I would say, this newer version of success for me, I would say really has kind of come about from having all these like quote unquote successes and achievements. And as we know in the Western world that it's like, oh, you did that, number 1 bestseller. Wow. And I realized that I was super unfulfilled and I wasn't happy. And from the outside, I looked like I had it all, this thriving career, which I had in theory, but it was like the money, the success, the going on TV, all of that. And I'm like, why do I feel so bad inside? Why do I feel lonely and unhappy? And I realized that I was never really like applauding myself for what I'd done. I was always moving on to the next thing. And it was like, oh, I didn't hit New York Times bestseller. Well, oh my God. And I would get really down and out about that. And so I had to it was really after my second book, which came out, I think 2 years ago. And I just had to do a lot of self-work to get deeper into what success was, because from the outside, I lived the life that everyone aspires to. And I had all the quote unquote things and achievements, but that doesn't make you always feel very good.
I'm curious, what does that actual work look like to get happiness, to get back to a place that you actually feel satisfied, fulfilled? And you mentioned there that you didn't get onto the New York Times bestseller list. So then what? Like that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what does that work actually look like?
Yeah. The self work, the inner journey. It's a bunch of, for me, it's different than what someone else might go through, right? Like we all have our own path that we need to find. But for me, it was really kind of coming into like what actually makes me feel good every day, what makes me want to get up, because I completely lost my passion for everything that I do. And most people don't really know that. But like, you know, this as an entrepreneur, there's so many days where you're like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And, you know, you doubt yourself. So it's just been really focusing on what brings me joy, what brings me happiness. Where do I find gratitude in every moment, every day? You know, what am I grateful about my career? And then also setting goals and working towards them, but not doing them alone, because that's what I had been doing in the past, was writing books, doing all the marketing by myself. Even when I hired a PR team, like I was still in theory doing it alone. And the more, like, I'm almost grateful now that I didn't hit New York Times bestseller, because I didn't really have anyone to celebrate with. And, you know, I've written a new book, and hopefully in the next year or so it'll come out. But I'm like, I would much prefer that one to hit New York Times, because I now have an amazing team, and my friends are incredible. And I would say that the work for me as well was letting go of expectations, because we all have such high expectations of ourselves. We don't have expectations. Well, we do have expectations of others, but within our own self and our own life, we hold ourselves to the highest standard. And so from my point of view, it was just taking a step back and really being like, okay, like, what do you want to do? Why do you want to hit New York Times bestseller? Because what I learned was that, yes, it was ego that was like, oh, well, you know, I want to hit that. And there was also genuineness of being like, I know if I hit it, more people will buy the book. Therefore, more people will get these good messages that I'm spreading. So what I've had to do is shift my perception from the significance driven things that I was doing into purely just a place of giving and serving and bringing value to people's lives. And then I do that because I try to fulfill myself and fill my own tank every day.
I like how you mentioned there that we can be our own biggest critic. And oftentimes I know for myself that I'm a huge perfectionist, and I'm the hardest person to deal with oftentimes, because I have such a high standard that I set. And if I don't meet it, I beat myself up all the time, which leads me to a place of unfulfillment, a place of oftentimes feeling down and out. Well, not completely out, but just down and out for a couple of days. And I'm just trying to get back to that place of, okay, what is it that makes me fulfilled again? And you gotta, oftentimes I found that you gotta take a step back and just look at all the things you've actually done, because we can get so like detached from all the actual good things that we've done, because we're so focused on the bad and the negative. Like, it's almost like we're conditioned for that. And I'm curious for you, have you always been that way? Like, when you were growing up, did you always set yourself a high standard?
Yeah. Far too much, actually. Like, I've always been the person that gets an apartment that I can't really pay for, or the car that doesn't make me feel good. And what I've learned is that when I do that, I actually work harder. I always find a way. And what I love about all the mentors and teachers that I've studied from is they say, you don't need to know the way. You just need to know the goal you're trying to hit. The way that you're going to get there will really come about. But yeah, I've always kind of pushed myself harder than I should in terms of, let's say, financial aspects, or just living my life, or the goals that I set. And then with that, obviously what comes is a lot of stress and a lot of frustration. And so I've learned to kind of scale it back a little bit and be like, okay, well, like, feasibly, what do I want to spend on an apartment that I don't feel uncomfortable with, but I still feel good? So that I can save more. Like, I've actually shifted my priorities a lot over the past few years from, spending too much to get to this goal, because I realized a lot of that was significance driven, to now I'm like, well, I'm fine to live in a, maybe lesser nice place, even though I just found the most amazing apartment in Miami. But it's, I'm like, I don't need the nicest car anymore. I'd rather save that money and invest it and really wake up and just be happy every day and not feel like I need to be on the rat race anymore. So the journey for me was actually after my second book, I left LA. I sold all of my furniture. My lease was up, sold everything, put the rest of it in storage, and I moved to Paris. And I was like, all right, I'm going to just live in Paris now. And it was one of the best years of my life because I just gave up everything that I thought I knew. And I was like, I'm in a country. I don't know anyone. I don't know the language. I just love it here. And I really started to understand my thoughts and behaviors and patterns. And I was able just to slowly work through those, through journaling, through meditation, through going for walks, meeting with friends, and also being halfway across the world from everyone you know. You really, like, you're isolated and lonely. And you're like, okay, so who am I? What do I, what am I doing? So that was a really like intense but beautiful journey.
Were you fearful in any way of actually just uprooting your entire life and then?
Totally. But I've also done it so many times because of modeling. Like, I've lived in 11 cities over 10 countries. So by the time I moved to Paris, I was like, meh, like it was a big move. It was probably one of the bigger moves I've done in the past few years. Moving from London to LA was, that was like 5 or so years ago. That was a pretty big move because I'd lived in London for 3 years. But yeah, I've kind of gotten to this point where I thrive in uncertainty. I almost thrive in uncertainty more than I do in certainty. Because I'm like, the certainty that I get is that I know I will be able to find something amazing in any situation.
So I want to unbox you mentioned there that you worked as a model in many different countries. So I want to ask you, going way back to how you grew up, what did you always see yourself as? Like, what were your dreams, your goals back then? What was your ideal career path that you wanted to take?
It was modeling. It was, when I was 7 years old onwards, I had the 90s supermodels, Cindy Crawford, Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss. They were all plastered on my wall, all the photos. And I got all the magazines delivered. And I was obsessed with them because they were so beautiful and glamorous. And I didn't, at that young of an age, you don't really know any better of anything, but that was my goal. Even when I was 15, my mom had to bring me to the modeling agency because, they have to co-sign that because you can't drive. And I pursued modeling, but I also just deep down, let's say in my subconscious or, that intuitive voice always said, get an education, never just be a model. And so my mother agency, she wanted me to go travel to Asia when I was like 17, 18. And I told her, and then, 19, I went to LA, did an exchange program out there for a year. And I just said, look, I'll go when I graduate college, but until then I'm not. So I was like old when I started the international modeling circuit at 21 years old. I was old.
What did you learn about being an actual model? Like, what is that industry like? Because it is like, I've heard a lot of things about it, but what was your experience like? So, we hear all the horror stories. We don't hear a lot of the good things, unfortunately. The good side of it is you meet amazing people. You get to travel the world. You become friends with just incredible women that you live with in the model apartment. You do get, fantastic jobs. Like, I had billboards all over China that I went and I remember they came out and I stood in front of them because they were like big and small ones. And I would like stand in front of them like, and literally not one person recognized that I was the same girl. But yeah, so there are some really incredible things. And, just getting to travel different places, like kind of free, like you're not paying to go to these places. The horror stories obviously are that you get measured every inch of your body. You always have to maintain a certain weight. Yeah, I was like measured on my neck, my waist, my arms, I had an agency tell me on my legs that they wanted my lower thigh by my knee to gain weight, but not my upper thigh. What?
They wanted, They wanted me to gain weight in my in my boobs, but not my arms. Like, I kid you not. You're just like, okay.
How does that work?
It doesn't. It doesn't. That's I left the agency. I moved to another country at that point. There's, because of the pressure to remain thin, models do obviously go through eating disorders pretty prevalently, which is, I went through 2 eating disorders during that time. I had anorexia and binge eating disorders. So, and I'm very vocal about it now because my mission is just to help people, and I've cured myself of those. So, the other challenging aspects too is, like, you're traveling all the time, and you'd go into the model apartment, and your roommate you're competing with for jobs. So you're crushed when she gets it, but like, you're still friends. And then sometimes, you have girls from different countries, and there's certain countries that, like, you just didn't want to be in a model apartment with them. Some people were super disrespectful. You go on jobs and they won't feed you for hours at a time. And then when they finally feed you, it's really shitty junk food. So, like, there's a lot of bad things, but there's a lot of amazing things too. And it is sad that the industry has such a bad name to it. But that being said, like, I don't encourage any girls to, like, actively go into the modeling industry unless they have a really good family for support, because, like, I didn't have that. And that's where it became really tough, when you don't have the support around you and you're in countries by yourself, and, like, you've just worked a 14-hour day. It's challenging.
Far out. Like, I can relate to the anorexia and binge eating part. Even though I wasn't a model, I happened to go down a very different road, but I still ended up with binge eating and anorexia. I went from 72 kilos of pure lean muscle to 53 kilos of just stick. Like,
wow.
You could put your hand around my bicep and arm, and you'd still have enough room. It was kind of crazy. And I just noticed, like, for me, I realized that eventually something had to change. Like, I ended up in hospital for like 9 days as a result of my stupidity. And it wasn't the fault of anybody else. It was like my own choices. But what I want to know for you, Nikki, is, did you ever get sick of the modeling, the control aspect of them trying to control your body and the way you looked?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I wouldn't say that I ever had so much issue directly with them as much as it was the pressure that I put on myself. Because at the end of the day, and this goes for anyone in any circumstance, like, no matter what industry you're in, or, if you're in school or not, is like, we tend to care about what other people think so much. Mm-hmm. But in reality, the only reason that we care about what they think is because we don't feel confident in ourselves. And so, because I didn't feel comfortable and confident in myself, if someone said, like, oh, you need to gain weight here, I was like, oh, even though I actually thought I looked really good, I was way too skinny. But for the modeling world, I was okay. Like, I went down to 45 kilos at my lowest, which was not good. But I kind of had an automatic trigger that said, I will not get less than 45. So I never went into that, like, super dangerous route. The only time it went into the dangerous route for me is when I was just consistently binging and restricting, because, you like binge on sugar and alcohol and all these things. And then you're like, or at least that's what I did. And then I just felt awful. So, but yeah, I mean, I believe that it's hard, because obviously the agencies do tell you different things. And, like, I went from South Korea, where they were the ones being like, can you gain weight here, and here? And then I went to Bangkok, where they actually wanted me to gain a few pounds. And so for me, it was like, I was my own worst critic, and it was just a matter of, like, it was control. I was trying to control all of these things and traveling and not feeling good about myself and this career that I was in, and feeling terribly lonely and having so much uncertainty that the only level of certainty that I had was right through the food. And that's where we know, like, eating disorders, it has nothing to do with the actual food. It's all about, what are you trying to control in your life? And so when I started, when I went into the health industry and learning about it, that's really what I started understanding, was just that it was me trying to control the uncontrollable.
They always say control where you can control, right? And oftentimes that for some people, they see that as being super difficult. I know that was the case for me. It's like, no, I want to control everything. I don't want to just control one thing. I want to control pretty much everything that's going on in my life, which is just leading me further down the rabbit hole of feeling worse. And I feel like a lot of young people, they compare themselves to what social media, what, models look like, the whole bit. Like, it's that sense of, you look a certain way, but what they don't understand is that person has spent hours, being decorated, the photography, the lighting, the Photoshop at the end, like real inner beauty. It's like, what is it these days? You just got to question that for yourself. And I know that I struggled with my own self-worth and my own belief for such a long time. But when I realized, for me, it was many different reasons, but it was having a good support network around me, like you were alluding to, that you didn't have. But for me, I had people telling me all the time. I just didn't listen. I was a stupid one.
I would not say you were stupid. And interestingly enough, this is what I coach people through, is you're actually putting yourself down by saying I was stupid, because you weren't. You just didn't know any better at that point. And right now, when you say that I was stupid, there's still a level of judgment there.
Yeah, like, because I know what I was doing was wrong, but I just believed in that moment that it was right. And looking back now, I think it was, if I had have listened, well, where would I be? Like, I look at it differently in a sense now that I'm sort of thankful that I kind of went through it, because now I can relate to so many different people, and now I can help people. And I guess there is that little bit level of judgment, because it was a sort of shameful thing to go through at the time. And like, when people say like, oh, you went through that, are you still like that now? I'm like, no, but like, no way. But I want to ask you, Nikki, what was the catalyst for you to sort of get into nutrition, get into wellness, get into your books, move away from modeling? What was it for you?
Very much what you said, like how you were hospitalized. I was never hospitalized for the eating disorder, because there was a 6-month waiting list. And I was like, mate, I don't have 6 months here. It was crazy. So I was living in London at the time. Well, I was living in New York, and that's where my binging got really, really bad. And I was living with a roommate who did crack cocaine every night and lived with her boyfriend. And we were in this tiny little New York apartment. And I just felt very taken advantage of by my modeling agency. And, you talk about not really having support or any of these things. And then, this crazy roommate, and I've been like a nice, bubbly person my whole life. And I taught myself yoga. And so I was teaching, her boyfriend yoga, and she would just get super angry at me. And so it was just like, it was the perfect storm for me to just soothe myself in food and then restrict, because I felt so guilty the next day. I went back to Colorado. She kicked me out of the apartment after she saw me teaching him yoga one day. And so I went back to Colorado, where I'm from. And I was like, for 30 days, I'm going to cook all my own meals. I didn't know how to really cook, and basic, just like put a salad together sort of thing. So I said I would do that, and then that I would get outside and get fresh air for exercise every day for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, I felt miraculous, just incredible. And I was like, wow, what just happened? Interesting. So I decided to move back to London at that point, and I kind of, I have a lot of internal conversations with myself, and I was like, all right, Nikki, well, you can move anywhere in the world. Where do you want to go? I said, I want to go back to London. And I started looking into becoming a personal trainer because I was like, well, I love fitness. My stepdad is from, like, my whole family is in the fitness industry in one way or another. And I was like, cool. So I started that, and I never really found my way into it. It wasn't my passion. But then I went to a nutrition course and I fell in love with it. That was my calling. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of went into the deep end, and I studied raw foods, got a certification in that, studied sports nutrition for everyday living. Then I became a certified health coach over a year program, and then later subsequently studied meditation, and then became a yoga teacher, did my vegan chef training, like all these different things, modalities. And I chose not to go down the specific nutrition route for 4 years because my whole standpoint in coming in with the eating disorders was food is not going to heal me. Like, food is one aspect that will heal me, but it's not just about the food. And so I didn't want to go teach people solely about food because my journey was into the mind, into the body, and, all these different things, exercise, all of it combined. So as I learned more, I actually started an Instagram account when I was in Colorado doing my 30-day challenge because, funny enough, in 2013, I was starting to post food photos on my personal account. And I had friends be like, Nikki, we love you, but why are you posting your food? Nobody cares what you're eating. Go figure, that was 2013 and where we are now today. So I was like, well, fine, I'm going to start a new account. So I started a new account and I named it Skinny Mini Me XOXO. And it was all about my eating disorder. And I would post, girls' photos that inspired me, getting strong and healthy, and inspirational quotes. And I would post headless body shots of myself because I didn't feel comfortable. Like, I could be vulnerable and talk about my body and everything I was going through without ever feeling like people judge me because, oh, well, she's just a model, And so the account started growing. Just the more that I learned, I shared the knowledge that I learned. And then, I started hitting the popular page like 2 times a day back when there was a popular page because I was doing something totally new and I was being authentic and I was helping people, through their challenges, and people were coming to me it was crazy. Men and women were coming to me and telling me their deepest, darkest secrets about their lives. And I realized at that point that, there was something in this for me. And I felt such a sense of pride to be able to help someone through, like, just to even listen to someone. And I had one woman actually, and my first book was dedicated to her. We haven't spoken in years after she came to me, but she started coming to me and telling me how she would go through the McDonald's drive-through with her son, and she was overweight, and her son would just be crying, and that he would be begging her not to eat the food, and she would do that. And she said, Nikki, you're my hope, my only hope. I don't know what else to do. Whatever you tell me, I'll do. And so we had beautiful conversations, and intuitively, it's like, I kind of just knew what to ask her and be there for her. And I realized from that's what I was just like, if I could do this for the rest of my life, and I didn't know what that meant exactly, but it was like, if I can help people through the shit that I went through, I was like, sign me up. And obviously there were iterations of my career, and like, I never in a million years thought I would be where I am today. Never. And I didn't plan for that either. I've never had a business plan or anything like that. I've just kind of gone with the flow. But that's the long version of oh no, I didn't even answer your real question though. So when I got to London, I went to an eating disorder clinic, and they told me it was a 6-month waiting list. So the doctor put me on antidepressant medication, and I was like, well, I'm not like depressed per se. I just need to figure out what's going on in my mind. I need to talk to someone, and therapy wasn't really covered at this point, you know? So I ended up doing this deep dive into, like, I signed up for a triathlon. I started going to these nutrition courses. I was really engaging on this Instagram channel. And this is to kind of preface with, I had insomnia for 7 years. I was on sleeping pills for 5 of those years. I was on Roaccutane, or Roaccutane for your viewers, Accutane, you know, for the West, 3 times by the time I was 21. And my dermatologist said, you're probably just going to have to be on it for the rest of your life. I was hospitalized twice for insomnia because even though I was taking sleeping pills, I was never actually sleeping. Like, I never woke up refreshed. And so I went to a sleep study in New York where they hooked up electrodes all over my head. And every time I'd walk out, they'd be like, you just need to stress less. I did CBT meditation. I did, valerian root, melatonin, chamomile tea, this, that, and I'm like, none of it worked. Literally none of it worked. I did yoga. And it wasn't until I really started focusing on my happiness did the insomnia stop. And then I didn't care about my body so much. I didn't care about the binges. It was just, so I shifted everything to, food, nutrition, happiness, all of that. And it's been it's a long journey, right? But that's a more full answer, the long answer.
I know completely. And I relate to that story quite a bit. And it's funny how, I like how you said that it's not just about food. It's about the mindset, what goes up here. And I think if we can look at food a different way, then we're able to progress forward in our life with like binge eating and overcoming that, which is what I had to do first and foremost. Yeah. I actually learned how to cook in hospital, funny enough.
Wow.
I'll use the term, I binge watched Gordon Ramsay.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Because I didn't have anything to do. I spent 9 days. Yeah. Most of the time was in absolute utter agony. And then after that, I would just, sit there on the bed watching Gordon Ramsay on TV. And I'm like, well, you know what? I have a problem with food, so I'm going to turn this negative into a positive. And I started memorizing all his recipes and I'm a visual learner too. And then when I got out of hospital, I started immediately experimenting. And my parents thought I was being a bit dangerous, but because I would experiment on them, like give them the food, like this is not poison, I promise. And ended up being quite a little bit of success and quite a little bit of a niche for me, because I found that when I was cooking, it's kind of like therapeutic in many ways.
That's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
I just thought this is weird. But it works. Like, it made me happy, and I was able to control what I was putting in my mouth. Then I was able to control if it was healthy or not, rather than just me going to the shop and buying what was on the shelf and then eating all that and hoping to God that, I didn't gain any weight and stretching and freaking out. And
so you brought up 2 really good points there. And one of them, this is why I'm always teaching people, count colors. It's the easiest way to lose weight, feel great, reduce cravings, have more energy, but not just count colors. It looks better on a plate. And you'll know this, right, about Gordon Ramsay and cooking, but it's everything that I share with my audience is that when you just like throw things together, just, whatever, it's not appealing. And when it's not appealing, we're more likely to binge it versus if you actually take the time to like make it look pretty. I always tell people to take photos of your food, because if you take photos of your food, you naturally are going to make it look a little bit nicer, which is like ironic that, maybe I started that trend, actually, taking photos of food.
You probably did.
I probably did, right? In 2013. Because I started telling people, take photos of your food. It helps you to really put together a plate that will make you feel great. Man, I'm like spitting out all these like quotes. That's cool. So I was going to say that. And then the other thing that you mentioned too is, like controlling what you eat, and you can put the right things. So I have a question that I ask people, and there's no wrong answers. I'm just going to give you my answer at the end of it. But what is the worst thing for your health that you can put in your mouth?
Ooh, sugar.
Okay, it's a little bit of a trick question. Yes, I agree. And the worst thing though is bad thoughts, talking bad to yourself. The words you say to yourself are far worse than any single item that you will ever ingest, including drugs and sugar and all that. Because when we talk to ourselves and we say, I shouldn't have sugar. Oh, and actually my post that's going up tomorrow is about, dessert's bad for you. Because the thing is, no, desserts are not bad for you. Do you ever go to you go to Italy and they have these beautiful dishes of pasta and then, tiramisu, and they drink wine with it. Same with France with their crepes and the cheese. And it's like they don't have a bad mentality with food because they never tell themselves, oh my God, I shouldn't be doing this. So the thoughts that you say, or the words you say to yourself, whether you actually say them out loud or you just think them, because you think, if I'm thinking them, I'm still technically ingesting them into my entire body, because our mind is connected to our body. The thoughts we think get stored as emotion in our body. We know that. That's when you go to yoga and you do hip openers, suddenly you find yourself like bawling, crying. And so when we focus less on, oh my God, I shouldn't be having sugar, because sugar itself is not really bad for you if you eat it in really just normal quantity, small, but when you sit there and say, oh my God, I shouldn't have done this. Oh, fuck it. I'm just going to binge now. I screwed up anyways. Right. And then the judgment cycle, because then once we start talking bad to ourselves, our body is in our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, our digestion stops. It's the analogy, for all the paleo people out there is like, if a bear comes, you're going to freak out and probably run away. Well, the first thing in the body that gets turned off is your digestion, because your body is so smart that says, okay, cool. We don't need to digest food. We got to run. And so when we go through that in day-to-day living, and here's the crazy thing, when your cell phone goes off, it puts you into your sympathetic nervous system. But literally when you get dings and alerts, when your alarm clock goes off and it's it starts your day in the sympathetic fight or flight. And so what happens when you're in fight or flight is your cortisol levels rise. And so when your cortisol levels rise, again, that's where you get that layer of fat around the tummy or the hips that people are like, I just can't get rid of it. And then I say, well, how stressed are you on 1 to 10? So it's things like that it's like, no, sugar is like, and I don't disagree with you, right? But that's why it's a trick question. It's like, no, sugar itself is not bad for you. Alcohol is not bad for you. It's when you ingest it too much because you think you shouldn't do it, or you then, yes, have an addiction to it. But how do we get addictions? Because of the mind. Yes. I mean, yes, sugar is ridiculously addicting. We know that. It's more addicting than cocaine. But that being said, if you're not eating packaged food, but it's a little bit, I said trick question, because we've gone about this nutrition thing way wrong.
I like the question. You got me.
Feel free to use it.
You got me. I normally have a trick question that I ask people as well. I've only asked it to 3-4 people now on a podcast setting. And I might ask you a bit later, but I want to bounce off your thing about the words that we tell ourselves. The moment we tell ourselves something, it goes into our brain. The more we think about it, the more persistent we are at thinking about that thought. It hasn't become a belief yet, but the more times that we actually tell ourselves that thought, we're persistent at telling ourselves that, which means it will be consistent at it, which then means we're going to create a belief, which then means it is harder to actually get rid of it. And people, when they go from a thought to a belief, they're more likely to actually do something with it rather than a belief will impact their emotions more than just a thought. Like I like how you said the thoughts will impact your nervous system and fight or flight, all that sort of stuff. But on another extreme level, there's people out there, and I know this to be true because it happened with me, when you actually make it into a belief and you're consistently telling yourself, this is what I believe to be true, but it's really not. And that's when you get into a whole new level. And I came up with this method I call the CAP method, which basically helps me, and how I hope it helps other people as well, to get overcome, because I don't really believe you can get truly over everything. You can overcome it. But when it comes to like depression, anxiety, stress, addictions, this method has helped me. So basically C stands for choice, A stands for acceptance, and P stands for persistence, which then leads into one of my other sayings, which is be persistent to remain consistent. So going back to choice, I understand that life ultimately is a gift. It's free will to choose what I want in my life. And I have a choice whether or not I want to accept my reality being the way that it is right now. So my belief system, all these things, I have a choice to believe it or not, or to accept that it is what it is. Or I can accept that I can change, and that's my choice. But I got to start by making the choice to change in the first place. Then I got to be persistent at it. Not going back to the original thoughts. I got to be persistent at moving forward, which then allows me to be consistent. See, consistency is the flow on effect of being persistent. That's the way.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
I realized that, because I've been through eating disorders, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, stress, and I've looked at it from that lens, and I've gone, well, this worked for me. And every single day that I get up, I'm doing the CAP method. I'm like, okay, well, it's my choice to feel this way, to accept that today I want to feel negative, or I can accept the good things in my life.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with traumas and all that sort of stuff, like I get it, it's hard. But at the end of the day, you have a choice to remain there or you can overcome it. And that's where the CAP comes in. So just tightening the CAP every single time by being persistent. That's really the key. So I thought I'd share that.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I think anytime you've gone through a self-discovery and journey like this, and we haven't, and here's the thing, everyone thinks that they're alone in suffering. Every single person is like, oh man, like I really have it bad. Nobody understands how bad it is. And it's like, correct. And you also don't know how bad my suffering is, because we never actively share how bad things are in the moment. And we can't perceive what level it is, because we all have different tolerances, right? So that being said, we as humans all suffer, and we've all chosen, whether you believe in God or, the universe or maybe not, right? We're just people here, whatever it is. We are here to learn lessons, to grow, to be on this planet for a reason. And we will all go through a tremendous amount of quote unquote suffering in our life in order to grow into the person that we're meant to be. Like I look at who I am now and I'm like, man, as hard AF as everything is that I went through, and I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, truly anybody, I wouldn't go back and change any of it. Not one single day, because I love who I am today. I love who I am because I've worked through it and I've gone through this journey. And as you said, like there's so much compassion and empathy for people that I'm like, you can do the worst things, quote unquote. And I still have compassion and empathy for you, because I know that whatever you did was based on either a limiting belief or a subconscious belief. So the way that I teach it is same, but different, right? A little bit that we have our subconscious mind, which is the back of our head. And your subconscious mind are the beliefs, and you don't know what they are because they're in the back of your mind and you cannot see the back of your head. So then your belief system, which is deep rooted in this subconscious, which scientists have said is 95% of the brain. We only know what 5% of the brain is actually doing at any given time. Your beliefs then come into the front, which is your thoughts, which are the things that we're conscious of, which you can see in the mirror, right? You talk to yourself. Your thoughts become your words. You speak out loud. So for example, your subconscious belief might be, I'm never going to be liked because I'm overweight. Could be, and you don't even know that that's there because it was something that got built in. My parents didn't love me because I was overweight. And then your thoughts constantly are like, oh, I'm fat. Well, I'm on this diet. It's not going to work. Or, oh, fuck it. I screwed up. I'm right. And then your actual thoughts become the same thing where you tell people that like, oh, I'm on a diet. Oh, I don't know. Your words then become your actions. So the very thing that you go and do. So if you're, you binge because screw it. Well, I messed up. Your actions then become your results and your results become your destiny. And so people have it all backwards saying, oh, I'm going to go on a diet. And it's like, well, no, you really should look at what's going on, where the destiny is right now, because your destiny is correlated to the back of your mind, to those subconscious beliefs that you don't even know what they are. And that's why you have to do the inner self work, is because it's not about, oh, another diet. Oh, I'll be pretty. Oh, I'll feel good. And like you and I have done this journey through anorexia and everything, which is hard as hell, but you have to really get into the mind to understand, why do I not like myself? Because inherently we all have that. We don't like ourselves until we do the self-work to learn how to like ourselves.
I've always said that words are cheap, actions are expensive. So if you say something, but don't follow it up with action, it's just cheap. Like it's easier to say than do something. But I like what you mentioned there, that you wouldn't change anything for the world, which actually leads me to my trick question. Would you rather sink or swim?
Swim.
Why?
Because sinking, well, I guess it depends on the context of it, right? Am I going to die if I sink?
So as a human being, what's the first thing that you learn to do? Do you learn how to swim first, or do you learn how to sink? When you first learn when you get put in the water, do you automatically know how to swim?
Oh no, you sink.
You sink.
Yeah.
So in life, I always say that it is better to sink.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, if as long as I'm not dying, right? But I hear you, because that's what I was thinking. If I sink, it means that I have the opportunity to come back up.
I always say as well, so you got sink, swim, or drown. So drowning is the death part. But when you learn how to sink, your choice is to keep climbing to the surface, because, obviously we need to swim. That's just part of life. But also learning how to sink teaches you a lot more about life than what swimming actually does. So,
I get asked a lot about business, and I do a lot of business coaching as well for corporations, because they want to know, how did I build this brand? How can I implement that success to other people? And I love doing it, helping others with that. But one thing that I've really kind of started to understand is people talk about like, oh, what are your successes? How have you gotten there? Whereas so few people talk about, how about all the times that I've failed, like quote unquote failed, because those are much more interesting to me than all of the successes, because all of the failures, all the times I've been told no, all of the times I've told myself no, all of those have amounted far more to who I am today than all of these successes that I've had. Because the successes only came from all of the failures, and picking your ass up and being like, all right, gonna do it again. One foot in front of the other.
100%. So I always say as well that in failure, you learn one of life's most greatest lessons, which is humility. It teaches you so much about life and how to move forward. Nikki, I know you probably got a heart out right now.
What time is it?
7:25 in.
Yep.
So
unfortunately, I do. Maybe it just means we have to do a part 2.
We got to do a part 2 because I got so many more questions for you.
Oh, I would love to. I'm like digging this conversation.
This is great. So we got to organize.
I know. All right, part 2. All right. listeners, let us know if you want us to do a part 2 and what questions you have.
Send in the questions to either Nikki or myself, but I've got so many more questions for you too. So we've got to dive deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, and I'm so sorry I have to jet, but it was a good taste for nearly an hour.
That's awesome. So definitely we're going to do a part 2. Thank you so much for part 1. We'll speak soon.
Yeah, I'm done. I love it. I mean, let's just get it on the books.
Let's do it.